You're listening to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And this week we're going to be talking about helicopter parenting, where you find that balance between protecting your kid, keeping them safe from danger, and giving them freedom, independence, letting them learn to do things on their own, which is so important. But it's a balance I think that all parents struggle to find, at least especially in this day and age. So we're going to dig into all that. But before we get into it, Brandon, how can our listeners reach out to us?
You can find us on all major social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. Give us a follow. Or you can email us at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And please find us anywhere you get your podcasts.
Yeah, I want to give a special shout out today to our international followers. I was checking out our stats on Spotify this week, and we've got listeners right now in Canada, the UK, South America. We love you guys. We apologize that you probably don't get a lot of the references that are very U.S. specific, and we're going to try and avoid that for y'all, because it's the whole wide world that we live in, and apparently the world is listening. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Brandon, our listeners have heard over the past several months Noah's adventures, his
saga.
The saga of his ear infections. Yep. And between last week's recording and today's recording, you guys got kind of a surprise, and I want to hear a little bit about that before we get started today.
Yeah, we had a bit of a development. So we have scheduled surgery to get some tubes put into his ears to help with the ear infection. So if all goes well, on the subsequent or an upcoming podcast here pretty soon, we would love to go into detail on how that process actually goes down, what it's actually like, the surgery, the process. So I really, kind of excited as the parent because the tubes mean relief. Mm-hmm. And then it could be an interesting opportunity for us as well on the podcast just to talk about what that's been like. I'll be the first of the two of us to get something like that done.
Yeah.
But the weird development this week is that we noticed that my son Noah, one of his eardrums had burst. So it sounds super terrifying. It was terrifying.
I was terrified when you texted me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Everyone I've told is terrified because it just sounds awful to say burst.
Yeah.
But I think the silver lining, if you're a parent, is that it's not too scary. Mm-hmm. Nothing explodes quite, loudly. It does actually kind of explode. But, they don't go deaf permanently or anything like that. It's just the buildup from the ear infection that's kind of always been there, just gets too much to handle, and it kind of bursts and the liquid kind of gets out. And, we noticed it. If you're wondering how do you know if this happens, do you hear a pop? No, you don't hear a pop. But we noticed kind of the crusting around the ear, almost as if like a nose had been running and had crusted. The same kind of thing happened with the ear. Took him to the doctor. They essentially confirmed, that's kind of what's been going on. So we're still on track, still fighting the good fight. Appreciate all of your concerns. Jesse, you and Ashley have been really supportive. So we're just trying to make it through, guys.
Oh yeah, now
we're getting closer.
I've also heard it described as your eardrums being perforated or ruptured. Is that the same thing? Do you know?
I would think so because it's just kind of like. The eardrum, it sounds terrifying, like you lose a body part or something, but it's like all of the things that are happening with the ear infection is like pus and liquid is building up inside the inner ear and just kind of clogging that up, and then that gets painful because it's building up. And so imagine the pain being like a little bubble, like slowly filling up with more and more, liquid and pus, and then eventually it gets too big and just pops. That's kind of what happens in this situation, basically.
Wow. Well, Noah is a trooper. He's a little soldier for fighting this fight. Those of us who are religious are praying for the little guy that everything turns out well. The rest of us are sending all their positive thoughts and vibes his way. And, I know that our listeners are looking forward to hearing how this all turns out. I am too. And, We'll hear more next week.
Yeah, it's weird to be excited about surgery, but I think, if any parents have gone through it, this is kind of what you need to do. Mm-hmm. What's been going on with you guys, Jesse?
So this week has actually been really huge for David's development of walking skills.
Yes.
I mentioned last week and I think the week before that he was taking steps on his own. Mm-hmm. It was only 2 to 3 steps at a time for a while. But this past Monday when I picked him up from daycare, the teacher told me that he walked basically across the room. That was like 15 steps, right? And so I wanted to test that when I got home. So I set him down in the living room, and sure enough, he walks towards me.
Awesome.
And, over the next few nights up until, this morning, I mean, he's still doing it. He can walk across an entire room and then keep his balance. His balance is amazing. I mean, it's something that we all take for granted as adults, but when you're a kid and you don't know how your legs work, I think it's such a revelation. And it is so weird to see my baby son, who, as far as I'm concerned, is still a newborn, right?
Yes.
Walking on his own 2 feet, and he's very confident in it now that he knows he can do it. It's just wild to see. I posted a video to our Facebook page, so if you haven't followed us on Facebook, please do. Dadsplaining, a fatherhood podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, parents who have gone through this know how incredible it is, but they also know the fear that comes with it, right?
Yeah.
Because now we really got to watch him.
Yeah.
And now we're getting really serious about the childproofing. And a few episodes back, we talked about childproofing. And Brandon, you brought up these sort of magnetic locks for cabinets and drawers. And we went ahead and bought those for our kitchen.
All right.
And we haven't installed them yet. I started working on it last night, and I think we're going to take care of it tonight.
Yep.
Because, I mean, they look really pretty simple, easy to use, but easy for adults to use, not so much babies and children. So,
They're
that's
pretty
the key.
Cool. I think it was Safety First. I want to say it was the name of the brand. I think we shared a link to it on our Facebook page, so another reason to give us a follow. I totally get a commission. No, I don't at all. But they're pretty neat. They're fun because you can't see them, so if you like aesthetics of keeping your cabinets without something on the exterior, it's on the interior, so that looks nice. And my son already has spent a minute going up to our cabinets and trying to pull on them because he can crawl and kind of sit up in front of them, but it just confounds him to no end because he pulls and pulls and pulls and they don't open. And I laugh a little bit inside.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Before we dig in today, there was one little thing I wanted to bring up. And Brandon, I don't think I've mentioned this to you yet, but a few weeks ago I was visiting family and I was talking about the podcast to my mom.
Yeah.
And she says, Dadsplaining. Did you get that from Momsplaining? And I said, Mom, what? She says, Momsplaining, Kristen Bell's thing that she does on The Ellen Show.
Yeah.
And it had not occurred to me, but I just want to say for the record, no, Kristen Bell, Dax Shepard, if you guys are listening, we did not consciously rip off Momsplaining to create Dadsplaining, a fatherhood podcast. It may have happened subconsciously, and if so, I would like to right here and right now publicly apologize and publicly invite Kristen, you and your husband Dax to come hang out with me and my wife, and we'll settle it over a couple of drinks.
Oh, fun. Or just be on the podcast, whatever. All tides.
Hey, what the hell? Sure.
Lift boats. We'll be on yours too. Who said, she said. I feel like we came up with a name before. Anyway, it's fine. It doesn't matter.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's great. We love you guys. Maybe just let it go.
You.
I can't help it. All right. Shall we jump in?
Sure. Okay, so this week we're talking about helicopter parenting. The reason we're talking about this is that last month PBS Newshour ran a story about a mother named Corey Wyden in the suburbs of Illinois. The story goes that Corey's daughter Dorothy, who was 8 years old, was out walking her dog in the neighborhood by herself one afternoon, right? Middle of the day, quiet suburbs. A neighbor sees the child by herself walking the dog and calls the police. The police come to Corey's door after her daughter Dorothy has come home and start up an investigation with Child Protective Services because across the United States, and this is true for other countries as well, but I feel it's especially true here in the U.S., neglect laws are very strict in how they define what is neglect. And I mean, almost anything can be considered neglect. Leaving your child alone in the yard, in the neighborhood, in a car, certainly.
Yep.
If someone feels that child is unsupervised and possibly in danger, I mean, that's cause enough for that state's Child Protective Services organization to launch an investigation. It caused a lot of problems in Corey and Dorothy's life, connected them with other mothers who had gone through similar cases. Another mom named Kim had left her child in the car, not in the middle of summer, not in the 98-degree, blistering heat, kind of in the fall or spring when it was nice and cool outside for 5 minutes with the car locked while she went inside to Target. She comes out, They drive away. A year later, they get a call from the police because this had happened in another state saying, hey, by the way, there's a warrant for your arrest in Virginia. You're being investigated for neglect.
Wow.
So, Brandon, when you sent this to me, I just found it so fascinating. It's something that we don't think about that often when we're in the phase of like protecting and cradling our little infant who, we're not,
exactly.
we don't want them to leave our sight. But as kids get older, you have to kind of toe the line between giving them freedom and keeping them safe. And I feel like things aren't the way they used to be, you know? Certainly in my childhood, maybe in yours too, Brandon, there seemed to maybe be a little less worry and supervision, a little less worry about what's going on in the world. And the further back you go in time, the more true that is. You always hear your grandparents say, oh, well, when I was a boy, I walked uphill to school
right,
in
10
the
miles
snow.
each way.
Yeah, by myself. And, these days I'm thinking, no, I'm going to drive my kid there. I'm going to wait until they get inside, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to call and check up on them.
Yep.
At least that's the perception, right? When you look at parents these days, you just think of them as erring on the side of caution, being overprotective. Of course, that's not true of everybody. But that seems like that's what society wants you to do because apparently the world is so freaking dangerous. So Brandon, I had some reactions to the story. How did you feel about it when you watched it?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this and why I feel kind of not terrified to talk about helicopter parenting is that we don't want to talk about what you might think of as the controversy around being a helicopter parent in that way. But rather, what interested me and you as well, Jesse, about this is those two incidents you mentioned kind of sparked this new conversation and this new way of looking at it. And what is kind of unsettling to me is the thought that another person, parent or otherwise, we don't really know, but another person can see something happening or some way that I am parenting my child and involve the authorities, involve something that can have humongous ramifications.
Yeah.
And people are not open to assuming that that parent is doing the right thing for their child. You are trying to use how you view things and how you do your parenting to judge someone else, to shame someone else. That's what I'm not cool with. So when I think about the conversation of helicopter parenting, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of like how over top you are of your child, but more so like, are you using your way of parenting to judge someone else's way of parenting? So I think I posted about this and I felt pretty strongly about it. Like, I don't want to judge you, Jesse, as a parent.
Yeah.
I don't want you to judge me. I don't think that's fair. If something like dangerous is happening that I witness, okay, maybe, but like there's gray area aplenty. But I just don't want to get into a conversation where we're trying to judge other people.
Oh, yeah.
From parents. I just think that's not cool. That's not what we're trying to do here. We try to give some advice. A lot of the time, we don't have any advice for you, and we just try to tell you what we failed at or what we did that we thought was good, and you take it the way you want to take it, right? Don't come to this show to figure out how to be a better parent, just to kind of figure out how to feel better about yourself being a parent. Is kind of how I feel about it. So that kind of terrified me as a parent to think that somebody else could do something that could lead to my arrest. Yeah. It could lead to them taking away my child. I don't think people really thought through the ramifications here. I'm sure they thought they were doing a good thing, but thinking through, the generous interpretation, like maybe that parent has set up really strict boundaries, like you can walk your dog around the block and you come back. So anyway, I want to dig in more. Please please watch the video because I hope to kind of have the commentary line up with it and not get like a field on judging or the controversy of helicopter parenting, but more just like what are we comfortable with as parents?
Yeah, and well, parenting is never one size fits all. I posted about this topic and I got a few different comments. And one was from our listener, Karina, who has a child on the autism spectrum, and one child who is on the ASD and then one who isn't. And, with her child who is on the spectrum, she says, I helicopter my ASD child because he has no sense of danger and he'll run into traffic. Yeah. I do the opposite with my neurotypical child. I warn her that she can get hurt if she falls. But if she falls, she won't do it again. Obviously, I won't let her go into traffic either. And then, of course, we got another comment, from Autumn, who is, like most parents, trying to figure out, well, where do I toe the line? What does my child need? And she says, I'm trying not to be a helicopter parent, but I sway, right? like you're saying, between judging others for being up their kid's ass on the playground
Yep.
or when they're playing with their friends, and then on the other spectrum, feeling judged by other parents for not interacting with my kids enough, right?
Yeah.
So she says, my goal is to try and be there as much as my kids need or are asking for, which I think is pretty cool. And
That's
her kids
nice.
are pretty young, and they're already learning that lesson. And of course, when I posted a question to field comments, I posted it with a photo of David with his mother. And of course, my wife, Ashley, comments, "Why did you pick a picture of me when referring to helicopter parents? What are you trying to say there?" And I'm not trying to say anything, Ashley. I
That you
love
are the best looking parent
Exactly. Yes.
out there that's not my wife.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I said, it's not one size fits all. But the other thing I wanted to touch on while we're talking about this is, one thing that I strive for with this podcast is to help relieve fears of parents, because it is apparently, on first look, a very scary world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And good intentions are what drive our parenting, right? We're always doing the best with the information that we have. We're never doing anything out of malice. Most parents, except for abusive parents, obviously, and that's another story, another topic. But the information that we have sometimes isn't 100% reliable. We've talked about that in previous episodes. We had an episode all about parenting fears, how scary this world is, things we're afraid of, not just failure, but also dangers from the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you look at parents today and you look at the cliche of helicopter parenting, of being overprotective, and that's something that's been around for forever.
Sure.
When I was a kid, there were the kids who, we thought were, that kid is sheltered. Their mom won't let them play outside of their front yard. And, they can't go out and play with us. They must feel so bad, yada, yada, yada. And it comes out of a fear. If I let my child walk down the sidewalk by themselves, they could get abducted.
Right.
They could get picked up by a child molester or a murderer, or they could get hit by a car.
Yeah.
And if you watch this news story, something that they talk about that resonates with something we've talked about before is that the world today that your kid lives in is safer than you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's honestly safer than it's ever been before. We talked in another episode about a psychologist named Steven Pinker, who has been talking about this, giving TED Talks for a few years about it, about how the world gets safer every generation. Incidents of crime decrease, incidents of war, violence, poverty, disease, it's all on the decline as, gradually. And there are dips and there are, hills and valleys, of course. You can't look at it as a microcosm.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, the world is safer today than it was when you were a kid. Not only that, but our kids have cell phones now. By the time they get 9 or 10 years old, they've got a phone where if you can't find them, you can call them,
Right.
or you could track their phone.
I would totally.
Right. But and every parent's going to do it differently. But the thing that they talk about that I think is so interesting is, the things that we're afraid of when we don't want to let our kids out of our sight are not always logical fears when you have all of the data and you look at everything.
Yep.
That's kind of what I took away from this story. We're just, and the thing is, we're more aware of these things now. We think, oh gosh, the world is more dangerous now than it used to be. There are more school shootings. There are more, incidents of random violence. I don't know that that's true. I just know that we have more information than we used to. We have more sources of media. We have 24-hour news. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're getting information at a faster rate than we'd ever gotten it. And we get it from so many different sources with so many different, private agendas of their own, that I think there's a word for it where when you see more of it, you get the perception. It's about perception.
Yeah.
We think that there's more of it because we see more of it, but it's always been going on.
Right.
We just didn't always have the spotlights that we have now to shine on these things. And that's something that I'm going to have to learn to toe the line as I get older and kind of figure out how much, not as I get older, as my kid gets older.
You too.
And me,
Yeah.
I'm aging too more quickly than I'd like to. But I'm going to have to figure out how much freedom does my kid need. And I'm going to have to deal with that fear and internal conflict that I feel right now of, I don't know if I can let him out of my sight. I just want to be there with him and protect him from the world. But the truth is, you can't protect them from everything. Everyone's going to have their own style and own pace, but if you err too much on the side of caution, you're going to risk depriving your child of developing a sense of independence. And those are lessons that are crucial for a kid, especially, in those first 5, 10, 15, 16, 18 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've kind of rambled on about this for a few minutes.
Good. I think let's dig into that because you're totally true, or at least I feel similarly to you. We're not talking in facts always here. We're just opinions, right? We have opinions. You have your own. Just as long as we're not judging each other, I think we're doing pretty good. But something that was interesting in this video as well is they talked about ways that different groups can plug in to think about this situation. Okay, so we talked about fear and projecting fear beyond maybe reality. That's something as parents that we can try to work on.
Yeah.
They made a kind of funny aside that maybe what we're imagining and projecting is more akin to what you would see in an action movie than in reality.
Yeah. So we don't live in the world of Taken.
Let's try to do a little better as parents. But beyond just parents, something that was interesting, they brought up a couple of neat examples I want to touch on in the video too about ways that I guess society or the community can be thinking about this. So it's not just on each of us as parents, right? We have enough burden. And so one thing that an organization, I can't remember the exact name, but it's in the video, they talked about, Let's Grow is the name of the organization, and they talked about this kind of concept of letting kids be kids. So a thing that they were helping pilot in a school, and I want to say Long Island,
I think it was Illinois. Maybe not.
I think this organization is actually out of Long Island, was that the local schools there, once a week, would have 1 hour before school starts as kind of, quote, open time for kids. So the kids could come to school and literally have free range over the entire place.
Yeah.
So the distinction here is this is like recess where you have free time, but it's before school and they can run around and frankly run amok. So they could run in the halls, they could run in the gym, they could run outside, they can take over, they have balls, hula hoops, running in the halls, playing around, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Parents, the teachers are there watching for safety, but they're not really interacting, they're not leading, they're not directing. And I thought that was very interesting because we can probably maybe agree that recess is important and having the free time is important. This is a little bit of a different step because it's about that freedom.
Yeah.
You're not being told you get to go play now. You're being told free range, do what you want to do here. And something that was brought up in a similar vein to this is that we kind of today, more so than in the past, think of free time in a structured way still.
Yeah.
They brought up the analogy of what I think they called like adult-directed sports. So think about like, you might be thinking, my son's playing on a baseball team. And you might be thinking, that's freedom and free time for him. But that's really structured.
Yeah.
You have practices. You have set time to do it. It's once or twice a week. There's a coach that's leading them and telling them the drills to do. It's not free and open.
Right.
And that's the different dichotomy here is like letting kids be free and open.
Yeah.
And how they can do that. What did you think about that, Jesse?
And that's what I loved about it. And, and they talked about even the physical aspect. They mentioned childhood obesity, and they said that, it wasn't a hard and fast, like this is why, but they said, possibly one of the causes is a decrease in unstructured physical play. They said children are not built to be running track and, playing strict like physical sports and weightlifting. They are built to be running through the woods and climbing trees and throwing things at each other and grappling and wrestling with each other. Like these are the things that work their muscles in a way that benefits them at that age, at that physical size. I thought that was really cool, and then that's just one of the programs that, and I said it wrong, it's not Let's Grow, it's Let Grow. Letgrow.org if you'd like to check it out. They have a number of programs. One is for schools, to help them kind of turn the keys over to the kids. And then the other thing that they do, another program, is where they teach kids to learn one new thing every day. And when I say that, like learn to do one thing independently every day. They showed some examples. One kid said, I want to learn basically just to walk around the block by myself. I think the kid was 8 or 10 years old. And then he went home and did that. And he came back and he gave a report on it the next day. Another girl said, I want to learn to pop popcorn by myself.
Right.
So she learns to use the microwave in a safe way and do it without adult supervision. And, we can have debates on whether the responsibility should lie with the parents or with schools and organizations like that. Like, everyone's going to have their own opinion. But the fact that someone is teaching these kids these skills and teaching them not just to do things on their own, but to feel like they have that autonomy, that really gives you a sense of confidence when you can say, I did this and I did this, not because someone else did it for me. I learned how to do it. I did it on my own. And, it kind of helps kids to feel more grown up and more independent. And I am always in favor of that.
Yeah, what I liked about that is it's so flexible to your parenting style. It can flex in on a conservative edge or a super let it be edge, right?
Yeah.
So we give the examples in the front of this podcast about kids walking their dog or walking around the block or being left in a car by themselves. Like, that can terrify you as a parent.
Yeah.
I get it. It's scary. Jesse, you even brought up, like, can you even let your kid out of your sight? Like, it's going to be hard to reckon with that for each of us someday, because we have little squishy infants that don't really move too much. Yours is now walking, but he's definitely not going to walk on his own right now. But the idea of, like, doing things independently, you can do them inside the house.
Yeah.
You can, one kid in the example of the story went outside and fed the family chickens in the backyard, right? So if safety is still something that you have trouble with, like, you don't have to start by sending your kid to the grocery store 20 blocks away. You can do independent activities that they can kind of learn on their own in the home.
Yeah.
That can map to your parenting style. So that's kind of what I like about it and why I feel interested in talking about helicopter parenting, because it's not about how overbearing you are with your kid. I'm not interested in that conversation. I'm interested in, like, you can still be around, you can still be watching your kids and feeling comfortable, but, like, ways that you can still let them be independent within that structure. That sounded really cool to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of looking at how am I already able to apply that to David. It's kind of too young to do a whole lot. But one thing that David has gotten good at is solo playtime.
Yeah.
His playpen, where it is in our house, if we put him in there and we close the gate and he can't open the gate yet, he can be out of sight but still within earshot. And that's important for him, because he can't see us, which means he's literally on his own and he has to self-simulate.
Yeah.
He has to play with his toys, look around, do things on his own, which was hard for him at first. But I think after a while, he kind of learned that, well, okay, if I am very upset, they're nearby. They're not gone. They haven't abandoned me. So over time, he's learned to really get good at just sitting by his own, sitting on his own, in his playpen, while, for example, my wife might be getting ready for work in the kitchen, which is just around the corner. That's something where already he's off to a good start there. And some parents may not be ready yet to do that with their kid. Because, some kids are just problem children and are, apt to break things, if they're going to throw a tantrum if they don't see their parents nearby. So, maybe that's not such a great idea at that stage. But it's something that I'm learning to do, and I have always had a problem letting go. My wife will tell you that when we started putting David down in his own crib at night, in his own room, I had a problem with that. I didn't think I would. And I didn't even realize that it was a problem for me. But my wife pointed out that I was constantly going in there to check on him. And if he cried even a little bit, I would go in there and pick him up and rock him. And that was actually doing more harm than good for that situation, because David was at that stage where he needed to learn to sleep independently. Yeah. So I adjusted, and I think that's all we can do. We can do trial and error, as parents. It is kind of on the job training. We're figuring it out as we go along, and you make adjustments, and you're probably not going to, totally screw up your kid.
You're not going to screw everything up.
Exactly.
We're all trying our best. But what I like about it is the thought of, or the way I kind of think about it is, don't judge others. We talked about that, but don't judge yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Just try to acknowledge, I guess, what you were talking about, Jesse. Like, you became aware of maybe how you were being a little overprotective, and you could work on that. And no one told you had to change overnight. Yeah. Ashley's not that much of a a browbeater. She's very nice. And so you can try to work on being better with that. Maybe one of the last things that kind of came up as well, because we like to include, any kind of data or interest or research or whatever. So one of the people that was interviewed as a part of the video, I want to say was a professor of psychology at Boston College. I don't have the exact name, but so someone who has been researching, child psychology and their development, gave out some statistics that I'm going to try my best to reference. I tried writing them down. So please make sure that this is all verified, but I'm pretty sure it is, at least from this person, was that, today compared to the 1950s, there is a 5 to 10 times higher rate for anxiety and depression in kids. So I don't say that to scare you, but this is more of how we're thinking about it today. If we're doing a little too much parenting, almost, if we're being a little too over-possessive and protective, if we're not letting let the kids be free mantra kind of try to seep in, when we talk about kids having more of these instances of anxiety or depression or even full-blown conditions, like we are almost contributing to that as parents. And that is another thing that's kind of terrifying is like I want to be aware as a parent so that I don't become the cause of something that happens with my kid. Higher rates of suicide in today's world than, previous decades, along a similar vein, right? But if kids can focus on being independent and learning and understanding what it means to take risks and fail and do it in an environment that's not controlled, but like you're a part of, I think that's all for the positive. And I kind of remember back to my childhood, I played outside all the time. And my parents weren't standing out there with me.
Yeah, same here.
What they were probably doing, I would assure you that they would probably tell me is they were standing at the window watching, right?
Yeah.
But even that, like I still think that's what's important about this conversation is like you can be involved, you can be around, you don't have to turn your eyes away and turn your back on your kids and leave them forever. But it's just like even a little bit of separation or a little bit of that feeling. I still get the feeling of independence in spades, even if my parents were watching me with binoculars through the blinds.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, I think most of us are kind of getting that right.
Yeah.
The perception, of course, is that this generation is a bunch of helicopter parents, those of us that even have kids.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's entirely true. I think most of the people I talk to who have kids are finding that balance. Again, going back to the media prevalence, we have so many different voices telling us so many things. I think that it kind of creates a narrative that we're all kind of soft and overprotective and afraid of the world.
Yep.
I don't think that that's necessarily true. I don't have any data to back that up. I could be wrong.
No, but that's great with your note on perception earlier is like, let's not judge ourselves too harshly. Like, let's not over-perceive that we're failing as parents.
Exactly.
Because we're going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as we're doing it with a good intent behind it.
So that's going to do it for today's episode. I would love to hear what you guys think about this. Feel free to send us an email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also connect with us on social media. Brandon, where can they find us?
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. We mentioned our dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And please take a look for today's episode anywhere you get your podcasts.
Fantastic. So next week, we mentioned at the top of the episode, we are going to return to the topic of Noah's ear infection. Brandon's son, of course, is dealing with this crazy saga right now. Next week, he is having the tubes placed in his ears. So, we're going to get an update on that. And I honestly, just speaking personally, I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And hey, Brandon, what is a dog's favorite crime show?
Oh, I have no idea.
Paw and Order.
Okay.
Get it?
Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious, yeah.
Paw like a dog's paw.
Oh, is that how that worked? Okay, got it.
All right, see y'all next time.